Greetings, music lovers. Welcome to another episode of the Raga Room with Deepa Joshi. A few months ago, I was introduced to the video of Vasanthi on YouTube. I was captivated by the music, the aesthetics. I kept going back to it time and time again. And I had to know the person that was behind this music. And here he is with us today at the Raga Room, Anirudh Varma.
Anirudh Varma is a contemporary pianist, composer, and producer. His training in both Western and Hindustani classical music has created a unique and often unconventional technique and musical style. The Anirudh Varma Collective is a collaborative project bringing artists and musicians of diverse musical and cultural backgrounds together to form a unique musical identity. The idea behind this venture is to showcase his identity as a composer, producer, and music director, incorporating the energy and perspective of the musicians who are being featured on his compositions and repertoire. This project is a contemporary representation of Hindustani classical music for both the musician and audience community. It aims at representing Hindustani classical music using Western classical music sensibilities as well as a whole host of other influences brought to the forefront by collaborators. The Anirudh Varma Collective is an attempt to showcase the eclectic hues and innumerable facets of the contemporary Indian art scenario. Without further ado, let's welcome Anirudh Varma to the Raga Room.
Hi Anirudh, thank you so very much for coming to the Raga Room, and I'm so happy that we are able to do this today.
Hi Deepa, thank you so much. I'm so glad we could finally do this. I'm really happy that you invited me. Looking forward
not
to
at all.
speaking with you.
Of course. Like there's something about your music. I can't put a finger to it. And the way that I was introduced to it also was very coincidental. I was listening to Rag Basant, and, as always, YouTube, the AI feature of it said Vasanthi. And I'm like, just the cover of it was so inviting, right? So I'll take a look at it and I get into it. And it was just something else. It just it takes you out of the whole zone that you are in. And then I have gone back to it at different points in time. I have repeatedly listened to it. So, and then I got to understanding your collective, the Anirudh Varma Collective, and the very many songs that you have released. Some quality about it that makes the audience want to keep coming back to it here and then. So my question to you is, now we have the man behind the collective. So the floor is all yours, my friend. Take us through your collective, how it happened, and some moments that you want to share with us.
Yeah, so I think, let's start with actually, so Vasanthi is something that's very special to us as well, because we had performed this, it's part of our second album, which is called Homecoming, but the version on YouTube was an impromptu, unrehearsed piece, because essentially Soumya and I had been planning to do one piece which didn't have an arrangement, didn't have a structure. We were just flowing into it as we were flowing into it. And so all we said was, let's keep a time limit, because we're anyway playing a 2 hour concert. And I mean, there's always so I think we had played the entire piece for about 11 and a half minutes or so. And then we
Mhm.
like, let's now somehow, and then we had a stopwatch on the side. So we had a cue. But I think Vasanthi is something that uh, the rag itself, I had initially discovered it when I was working on my debut piano EP, much before the collective was even born. But I didn't know back then that the rag was called Vasanthi.
Okay.
Uh, I had gotten into Indian classical at that point, but not as heavily as I am right now. But and lots of times we tend to play things that actually rags, and we don't know that till we actually. So then Soumya said, let's try and play something that's impromptu, if possible, without a rhythm structure. And
Mm.
we have the Ghatam playing in that video, but he's actually not playing like a proper rhythm cycle. It's more like just holding it for us. And we have the amazing Abhinay Palli from
Oh
Bangalore.
my God. Oh my God. That is it. That just does it. It was just absolutely wonderful, his guitar
Yes,
performance.
and
Yeah.
I've been hearing it for some time, and we've been in touch. We got to know each other in COVID. But a lot of musicians we got to know in COVID, and we've been trying to do a collaboration. And I would say, fortunately, our first collaboration with Abhay was not virtual; it was in person, which was Vasanthi, and for the so this was actually part of the album launch concert at the Kamani Auditorium in April.
Uh-huh.
And I think in person, it's just an energy that you cannot put a finger on. And I think we've been fortunate that Vasanthi, and we were actually very nervous about it, because we felt that it's not a piece that everyone might relate to, or it's too ambient and too meditative, and maybe, but we were pleasantly surprised that, I'll be honest, that there was pin drop silence. We were scared that there'll be some jitter, some whispers in the auditorium, but the entire Kamani audience was just pin drop, and we were like, this is an energy that we haven't felt. And I
Correct.
think they hadn't felt it. And it's fortunately doing quite well on YouTube as well. Surprisingly, it's more than 500,000 organically. We don't use Google Ads because I think we've always, as a group, we wanted to see how organically things, curious actually, how people will react to it, how people will respond to it. And that's actually what and how the collective was born in 2016, while doing my master's at the Baker University in performance studies. I was writing a paper, research paper, an end-term paper on something called the collective energy, how
Okay.
multiple parts, multiple energies come to form one, and how the collective responsibility comes into play. And so that was how I felt that. So I was brainstorming about. I just released my debut piano EP, and that I was thinking that we need to how does the album become special? And I thought, maybe let's collaborate with different artists, a few, maybe 5, 6 artists who I know, so that it is my album, but it's also like a contributing. So we worked on a piece called Jinjoti back then in
Mhm.
2016, which was 15 musicians from across Delhi who we knew. Because when so I've studied in Delhi University for my bachelor's, and it's heavily influenced by and both Western music and Indian music, but Indian classically it's very heavily influenced. And so we met a few people there who I felt would really suit the composition. And when that came out, they in 2017 October, I think, took a year for us to actually understand what we're doing, because it was, I mean, it shouldn't be. I always felt it shouldn't be just it shouldn't be a random or just a collaboration of any sort. It needs to be some purpose, some intent for it to. So we took a good 1 year to understand what we're doing, because it was very new for us. And I think that first track in Jyoti is what formed the collective. And we were like, then, so we did 2 songs after that, Maru Behag and Tilak Kamod. So
Yeah.
each had, so 3 different songs, 3 different lineups. It felt logistically, it felt like I will go crazy, but it felt worth it. And then we had we finally launched our debut album Perspectives in 2018 at the India Habitat Center, featuring about 15 musicians from across India. The purpose of the collective has always been to put out and present Indian classical music um, in a contemporary yet in a rooted format. Because coming from a Western classical background initially, being a Western classical pianist, I always approach Indian classical from a harmonic perspective, not
Yeah.
and Indian classical is a melodic art form. And so it was always interesting to see and challenging that how will harmony enhance the rag and not disturb it, because very often using notes that are outside the rag, it might disturb the emotional quality. For me, the emotional quality in music is very important. So gradually
Absolutely.
we felt like there needs to be something that it is contemporary. Contemporary for me means today's approach to it. I'm not saying, and we just don't use the word fusion because it tends
It's
to
not.
be
It's not. Yeah.
taken.
Yeah.
Also, fusion is a very unfortunately it's a misused word in the Indian in any form of music. But we felt a contemporary approach to Indian classical music where we wanted audiences of all age groups and backgrounds to able to appreciate it, to to sort of uh, find themselves accessible, so that it's sort of accessible to everyone across all age groups. And it was interesting because we had people coming and telling us that we don't listen to classical, but somehow what you put out doesn't feel like it's classical. So we explain that, well, it is classical. We're still playing Tilaka mode as Tilaka mode, but the presentation is in an ensemble, in a song format, where our challenge is to keep the tal needs to be, so the we form the our arrangements are always around the tal. So even if it's a teen tal composition, we're playing in teen tal, and all our arrangements are sort of sketched around it, so that both forms are respecting each other, and so that it feels like one. So the collective energy comes together, and I think that's where we wanted that everyone can listen to it, appreciate it, and they sort of the way they listen to any popular piece of music. We wanted that and I have always felt that if one listens to an Indian classical composition, a Chota Khyal, you'll it is very interesting how they are so singable. It actually a lot of compositions are actually very singable, but it's only because traditionally people improvise and sing it. So the same line will be sung 20 times, but with some variation. So the listener can't hold on to it. So we are using an arrangement where, yes, we're giving space to everyone and the rag to open up, especially. And that led to one thing led to the other. And then we began sort of, I think the first album came out in 2018. And immediately after, we collaborated with more people. And I think 2022, we put out the second album, which is about 150 musicians from India, USA, and Canada. So it took a good 3.5 years to actually come out, because we also same reason we gotten rid of a lot of songs, because we felt that it's just not doing justice to what we're gonna do. And also I think it was taking and the group like ours, where it's not a regular band, it's an ensemble where you're very sensitive to all that's happening, to everyone's headspace, to everyone's priorities also. So I think everyone had different priorities also happening in the middle, which is good, because I feel that when they have different things going on, they bring those influences back to the collective. And yeah, so that's how we were formed, and we're continuing to work on new material and new ideas.
Wow, that's whatever you just said in the past few minutes, there's so much one can infer from it. Number one, I just want to highlight when you said when you played in Kamani Auditorium, the Vasanthi, and how you felt there was pin drop silence, and that was the energy that you felt. I think that is so important for the artist and the audience to experience that, and it yields to the improv of what you are doing so much because you're feeding off of the energy from the audience.
Correct.
And Also, you were talking about bringing the emotiveness of a raga, which is exactly what I could put a finger on when I listened to the Anirudh Varma Collective songs. And that is why people resonate with it, because the bhav of any song is what actually captures the soul of people who are listening to it,
True.
isn't it? And
Absolutely.
the place where you actually came from was, you were talking about writing a paper on collective energy, and I just want to talk about it a little bit more. And you're so young, and I feel like when I see you play, or when I listen to your music, there's such a beautiful blend of this. You're like an old soul, plus you have this great capability of mobilizing and working with the Gen Z. And the great thing that you are doing is just what you highlighted, was when you said people do not quite listen to classical music, is what they were saying, but it resonated with them. And that's the responsibility of any musician, uh,
True.
voluntarily or involuntarily, to keep the music evolving and interesting to um, generations that are going to come in. Nothing could be more beautiful than what you are doing right now. So, in that regard, how does it? Where did you? How does this all come together? Like your experience and your vision, and you talked about collaborating with 15 musicians on your very first album. So that's not easy. And you also mentioned about logistically how challenging that is. And that
Right.
goes without saying, really, because it's not easy. The music is just one thing, but to manage the logistics is completely another thing
True.
altogether.
And of course.
So, where does that experience come from? And what gives Anirudh Varma the inspiration, or talking about the
Mhm.
collective energy itself? I would love to talk about it.
I think my paternal grandfather has a big role to play. So I come from a family of lawyers and musicians. My great grandfather was the founder of the Prayag Sangeet Samiti in Allahabad. And my grandfather, the late Mr. S. N. Varma, he's a senior lawyer in the Allahabad High Court, but at the same time, he's a very respected musician. So Pandit Kumar Gandharv and Ustad Zakir Hussain, they're friends who used to come home for Baithaks in Allahabad. And the one thing I took from him in my early years of music and musicianship was that the simplicity of music needs to be kept intact. The technical virtuosity, of course, will sort of complement it, but it can't be just that. And uh, that's what even as a pianist, uh, I don't play like, I mean, I used to, when I was in school, I was playing much more faster, so to say, more technical music, even as a pianist. And I think I grew out of it. And I mean, of course, if someone asks me to play it now, it'll take me some time to get playing those very complicated things. But I think it's a very important thing is the energy and the emotional quality of music that came from there. And then it further came into the collective, where I felt like if I'm doing Tilak Kamod, I need to understand what we are doing and what Tilak Kamod is before. So there are some, very often I tend to deviate on purpose from a rag because I feel that that particular feeling is actually part of the rag. So we are, and even in the collective, we have a constant argument and discussion about, but why are you putting that note? So I have to very often explain that for me, that note is part of it. And I think uh, it was very important that we found people who shared the same vision, because there are some fantastic people in the country, but it doesn't mean that they always fit in to what we're trying to do, because uh, a group is works well when people gel well with each other. So we now have,
Alignment.
exactly, we now have a core band of 10 people, uh, 11 people, 5 singers and 6 instrumentalists, who I call the core band because they're my go-to when we start a project, or we just played at the City Palace in Jaipur day before yesterday.
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
so we, I think we've become a very tight family now, Touchwood. And uh, when we began, it took some time because logistically, like I was saying, it takes an independently funded project. So we did a crowdfunding. Our second show ever was a completely crowdfunded concert, and we were fortunate that we actually raised more than what we had wanted to raise. And and like you said, the energy between the audience and the performing and the artist is very important. So, in my opinion, the energy is translates. So from the artist and the artist on stage to the audience and back to the artist, because there's a constant, because if they aren't really into the experience, then it throws you off as well. And when they are into it, then it inspires you. We've had uh, performances where a song is supposed to be 10 minutes long and we played it for 25 minutes because it just went on. But that's the beauty of Indian classical, where you can. So we tend to have very often, like, the good thing is, I think we found this way where there are structures. It is structured in a way, yet it's open ended, because if we feel that we can push something, we'll just extend it, for example. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that drives us. And even the paper, I mean, the paper which I wrote was inspired by this um, this person called Dinah Taylor, who wrote about the collective as a whole, and also memory. And so she actually the driving point was the archive and the repertoire, and how today's repertoire is tomorrow's archive. Tomorrow's archive is day after's repertoire.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And how it's very important that the archive is transferred, the energy transferred from one generation to the other. But it is not necessary that they'll always perceive it the way the previous generation had. So when I stayed very strongly that artists like Pandit Kumar Gandhar were also presenting a contemporary version of rendition of Indian classical music, because that was his time, that was his thought process. So the word pure becomes a little, like, it hits me a bit, because I asked myself, what is pure to start with? So from our end, what we try and do is that, because everyone has learned, for example, again, the same rag has been learned by different people in the group differently. That's the best part, I feel, because then we have colors. That's why the first track was called Colors in Jyoti, because the colors of the rag were brought out. One very pleasing, one more aggressive, more playful. So yeah, I think that's how we um and I think it becomes important to adapt to what is happening. So on one level, I mean, so I don't think I follow trends so closely. For example, we're very often told, why are songs so long? And I'm like, if I can't, I mean, for my answer is that the rag only opens up after a certain time. Some songs are shorter, but if we have a piece called Stories of Kalyan, which is 10.5 minutes long, and we were told, no, no, don't keep it, don't listen to it. I said, if I do that, it'll become like it'll become poetry of Kalyan, not stories of Kalyan anymore. And because it's important that the song needs to open up and take its own shape. And we were told that keep it 4 minutes, 3 minutes, because of social media. People have very short spans of, and I do agree that people do have short attention spans, but if you give them an engaging piece of music or piece of art, they will listen to it. They will engage, because if it somehow if you manage to attract uh, for me, it became very important that I want to produce the kind of music that I would want to listen to myself first. So if I'm not convinced with if I don't like what I'm hearing of my own, that goes out completely, because so that's why it took a long time. We are very, very patient in terms of, and we're very strict also with ourselves that no, this is not working, so it's not working. And we tried not. So I think 2020 we didn't touch the album at all. Somehow it just didn't work. But we didn't work on it, but we did a series called the Quarantine Sessions with ABC, where we wrote and sort of collaborated with those artists who we've been wanting to for a long time. But for some reason or the other, we couldn't, because either they have busy schedules or we couldn't. So we met a lot of interesting friends and new friends from the Indian and from India and from abroad, who brought in a very interesting energy to the project. And yeah, I think that's what
COVID did do a lot of good, because people could focus inward and they could see what was important to them. And a lot of great projects came out at that time. Raga Room is one of those. Actually,
Right.
it was from the COVID. Um, but again, I was just thinking about what you were talking about, the social media and the attention span, which is actually a good point that you bring. More often than not, we are so busy scrolling through and we don't even
True.
pay attention to what is happening. But I do believe that what you are doing is good and it's great because you have to let people explore it for what it is. And it's not everybody that scrolls. There are very few, there
True.
are people, there is also a subset of people who want to take it for all it is. And even though it is a longer episode or it's a 10-minute thing, but once you get into it, and these are the same people who will go and talk about it to their friends and who will say, this
Correct.
is when it gets engaging. So, in some way, you're transforming the people with a short attention span to kind of explore it in its entirety. So, it's authentic,
True.
maintaining authenticity is just absolutely wonderful. And when I listen to you talk, I feel like, I could sit and talk to you all day, especially when you were talking about influence with Pandit Kumar Gandharva. In any form, anybody has been touched by Panditji it has had some very deep and a very profound influence in their life. Some
True.
songs that he has sung, as of today, I listen to it a million times and I'm so teary-eyed when I listen to it. And you have had Pandit Bhunesh Kumkali, his grandson.
Correct.
He has sung one of the Chayanat, I guess, right? So would you like to
Shayanat.
quickly talk about that?
Yeah. So Bhuvnesh ji has been again, both families have been very close. My family and their family have been very close, and they used to come and stay with us in Allahabad. Uh, and it was about just a matter of time. I mean, I feel it's just a matter of time when would write to him, and I wrote to him that this is there's something we're doing, and he's a purist. But again, he's actually a very contemporary artist because of the way he approaches. He adapts a lot more easily than some of us do to things, and which is saying a lot considering the background he comes from. And so I shared the idea with him, and he said, "तुम क्या करना चाहते हो?" मैंने कहा, and I mean, I think he expected me to say something very popular by Kumarji. But then, in my opinion, Chayanat, the composition we did, is also very I mean, the way I hear it, because it's a very catchy composition. And so I said, एक बंदिश है कुमार जी की Chayanat, so we wanted to explore that. And no drums. I felt that there are some compositions I just cannot hear drums. So we said, hearing nothing, no drums, ghatam, tabla, piano, flute, sitar, and a choir who will back you. And he said, okay. Uh, and it was awkward because he made me sing on he said, "Pehle tum gao." मैंने कहा, I said, and I was around people. I'm like, so I sang like, "Chalo karte hain." मैंने कहा, okay. So then he came, and Delhi for a production, and we worked on it from scratch with him. And the best part was, he being such a senior artist, he just um, was really friendly with everyone, including the younger students who are currently in DU, who are part of the choir. And he felt like a very natural part of the collective. And we made the arrangement and kept it very simple, in the sense it was actually it was a 5-minute piece, which interesting part was that his alap in it, I think everyone feels that as well, is that you learn China by the time his alap is over. So some of us didn't know the exact chalan of China at that point. But by the time the intention was that the common listener should be able to grasp China by the time his alap is over. So we kept it 2 minutes long in the album version as well. And we've been actually blessed that that composition got a lot of love even today. It's asked for a lot. And something about, I think, because also most classical compositions are talking about either Radha or devotion to God, but that was talking about a very simple human emotion, which is you meet someone after a long time and you pretend that you all is well and good, but maybe it's not. And it's a very general, everyday, your daily life, uh, something that we could all relate to. And I think it became a very special track. And then we did another one, which was a live rendition called Sanj Bhai in Yaman Kalyan. China tell me recorded finally in 2020, a day before COVID hit. So we recorded and
Okay.
shot it. And then next day they called the
For
lockdown.
a lockdown. Yeah.
So we got very lucky at that point because, and then he came back for the album launch at the Kamani where we did, again, that's Ab Mori Baat was another impromptu. So we did Vasanthi and Ab Mori Baat and Shud Sarang as the impromptu compositions. And it was surprised. And also, I think Bhuvneshji's energy, the composition he becomes the composition and vice versa. You forget
Actually.
about the hand gestures, the theater. So he and Kumarji were a very important case study in my masters, which is about theatricality and musicality, how important a role they play. So with him, it's very, you just sit with him for 5 minutes and you're just, it's a lesson in its own, because the way he talks and the way every rag is a human being. And the fact is that why look at it only from this direction? Look at it upar se, yahan se, wahan se, har jagah se. And it takes years for you to actually do that. And we're like, okay, just talking to this person and being around him was always. And the best part was the audience connected with him, so did the entire group, which was a very good feeling. So yeah, I think that's what the collaboration with him was, and that composition is a go-to for a lot of people, I believe, and for me also. I mean, I feel that it's just a very simply arranged. We kept it very simple, nothing over the top, and I think probably that's why people like it, because we kept it really simple for that one. And yeah, I think.
Just in the beginning of the conversation itself, you said something really very nice. You said that in a collective, everybody brings something to it. And I think the specialty of your collective is the fact that you absorb the energies of people who are in your collective and you actually adapt it to your music. And
Right.
hence, it is kind of making the mark that it is. And like, let's say now, how do you come up with these projects, these concepts, and what inspires you is number one. But then I'm sure with the kind of success that you have been having with ABC, there are several people who come to you with different themes, different concepts. How are they vetted? What is your process?
So we don't have a single process, but initially when we began, the idea was that someone would bring a composition and I'd record a basic scratch, vocal scratch of that piece. Then I started working on the arrangement. And then earlier how we used to work was after making the arrangement, I started looking and brainstorming which artist could be this composition, could be a part of this composition, because everyone isn't. So like China, it was played on sitar, we have Shwamitra Thakur, but for another track called Bihag, we had Mehtab Ali Niazi, because Shwamitra as a person is very gentle, is very easygoing, with a lot. Mehtab is much younger, and he has a lot of enthusiasm and sometimes has an aggressive side while playing. So, and we did a very fast solo for that. So I used to brainstorm, which artist would work really well and who could make this composition their own. So that's what the process earlier was, and then we would sit down and break down the arrangement. Uh, and of course, I think we outgrew that as well, because after a point, we now we have a more organic process, but because that's also organic. But I feel this is more organic because you're sitting with everyone. But so our core team sits together now and works on a piece of music. So sometimes I might have a composition in my mind which I'm playing, like a not a bandish, but like something that might be in a certain rag or around it. Then we'll start working on a few ideas here and there. Of one idea which was not a bandish was Homecoming, which is the title
Mm.
track, which was I had composed it in 2019 May, and I sent it to one of our vocalists, Pratik, who wrote the words and sang the lead in that. And that, so the interesting part was the final version of that composition, which had was very cinematic and orchestral. Somehow a lot of us didn't connect to it by the end of it, because we had heard that composition for 1.5 years as just a piano, sarod, and voice composition. So the very simple minimalistic stuff. So very often it backfires as well, that the very minimalistic version we get attached to.
Mhm.
And then when the choir or the band comes in, sometimes it throws everyone off, especially people who've heard the older version.
Correct.
Because something about a very simple version, and I still have, we also end up recording and shooting and documenting everything, because that archive and repertoire theory just, um, at one point, my professor told me that I think you're obsessed with Diana Taylor because you're only talking about her. But the thing is, she had a very huge impact on my thinking. So we document everything from rehearsals to recordings to concerts, of course, but every single. So I think we have a good 15 terabyte of data, uh,
Wow.
because
Wow.
and so I think my investment is also in hard drives more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
But that's the exciting part, because we end up finding old recordings that we haven't touched, or some very raw, like, and very often on Instagram, I'd like to put very raw things because I feel that, and I like to put behind the scenes because I wanted that the audience gets to know more about the artists and our process, because I feel it bridges this one gap. It's not just the song they just listen to, but also our process is what then they're sort of more personally involved with.
The mood of
And
when it was being created and how.
exactly, because that moment was that moment, it can't be replicated, but we have something to at least go back to it and sort
And
of
it mentally
explore that.
wires people to kind of align themselves to that moment when you actually do put the album out. They know where you're coming from because you've already given them that kind of a
True,
prelude to the song.
true,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And then I think we started growing into that. I think 20 last year around August, we got a call from Teamwork Arts, who also manage us now,
Mhm.
that we have the Mahindra Kabira festival that we do every year. And you guys put out this one clip of Ud Jayega Hans Akela on
Ah,
Instagram. Would you be interested in? And we worked with them before that for a good 2 years or so. And but in our contemporary classical set, they said, "Would you like to curate a new set of Kabir compositions?"
wow.
I was I was first very honestly a little scared. I was like, "Hum kar payenge? Is it not our comfort zone? Like should be?" I said, "Give me 2 3 days. Let me brain before I say yes to you that we can actually take it up." So we spoke to the team, and I felt like the core team who does the contemporary classical stuff, they might not be the best team to do it because they come from different influences. But and also to pull off a Kabir bhajan, a set of Kabir bhajans is not just a joke. You can't just sing them. You have to
You have
live
to
every
so.
single. You have to live every single word and note that you sing. So, uh, and I felt like some of the classical vocalists probably couldn't completely live it. So I had to curate it from scratch. And we said yes, because I felt let's do this because we wanted to explore folk, but we didn't get a reason to do it. But finally, when we got this call, we were like, we should because we have a reason to get into it. And touch wood, that concert in Banaras on the Ghats was probably my amongst my favorites till date. Something about it. It was we again. I couldn't. They said, "Will you bring the ensemble?" I said no. The band will not. The drums. I couldn't hear drums with it. Somehow, it's just my process, and some things are just raw. And so again, we had ghatam, tabla, flute, sitar, piano, and we had a
uh,
small choir.
I
So
would have
because I felt
loved
that
to have
okay,
been a fly on the wall at that time. Any concept first calls us and it takes us. We just have to go,
absolutely.
right? So, having said that, if somebody were to come to you, like an artist or someone with a theme, what is the process if let's say if Deepa Joshi wants to come to you with a theme, so what is the process that one would have to follow?
We usually ask them just to share what they have in mind, because this happens a lot. But with social media being so easily accessible, people from across the country write to us. So we said just share the idea with us on email, or if you have a raw recording, audio, video, whatever. And if it clicks, then let's
It
connect
clicks.
and see what can work out.
Absolutely.
Because that's what it is. I mean, connecting with more people, and because the community is, it's actually, the collective is a community of artists, of not just musicians, but we have design like graphic designers, illustrators, videographers, photographers, hopefully poets now who will write original lyrics. So it's
Wow.
always it is an community of artists of all genres, and we're always open to. And I mean, I'll be honest, I take some time to respond very often, because I feel like, and I reply saying that I will respond on slightly more better headspace, because very often there's too much happening. And earlier because I used to manage everything, including the logistics, and manage everyone. So I used to just too much white hair.
It's
I thought,
very overwhelming. Absolutely. No, I know what you mean.
but
Yeah.
now we started delegating everything. So we have students across India wanted to join the choir, for example. Very simple process. Just write to us with what you have, what an idea, or whatever it is, and if it clicks, then that's it. It's as simple as that.
Wow. More power to you. You're providing a platform to several people, and you're encouraging of people coming to you with ideas. And it's a very inclusive concept that you are working on. And then after all that, to kind of take the essence, the best of it, and produce something as beautiful as you do. Best energies. May you do more. And
Thank
may
you. Thank you
Anirudh
so
Varma
much.
Collective really permeate in all over India and globally. My best wishes
Thank
to
you
you.
so much. Thank
And
you.
thank you so very much for coming to the Raga Room, and really
Thank you
appreciate
for
your
joining
time.
me. Thank you so much. I was
Bye.
so glad to be.
Absolutely.
सोनवल लाडली राधा सोनवल लाडली राधा सोनवल लाडली राधा. Dear viewers, we hope you enjoyed watching this episode just as much as we did bringing it to you. Thank you and have a wonderful day.